Christmas has a very dark origin, and I'll prove it's still controlling you today. What if I told you that everything you celebrate on December 25th was designed to program your subconscious? And what if the people who created these traditions knew exactly what they were doing? There's a reason Santa is an anagram of Satan. It's not coincidence, it's etymology. And before you dismiss this, let me show you something that'll break your perception forever. Look at the word Christmas. Christ Mass. A Mass for Christ. But which Christ? Because the Jesus of the Bible wasn't born in December. Every scholar admits this. So whose birthday are you actually celebrating? And why does Santa, this red-suited figure who sees you when you're sleeping, knows when you're awake, judges if you've been bad or good? Why does he sound exactly like an occult description of Saturn? Here's what they don't tell you. The words, the symbols, the rituals you repeat every December were specifically designed to keep you locked in an ancient frequency. A frequency of materialism, commercial worship, childhood programming that follows you into adulthood. And here's where it gets disturbing. In ancient Rome, they celebrated Saturnalia, the worship of Saturn, the god of time, limitation, and control. The dates, December 17th to 25th. The traditions, gift-giving, feasting, decorating trees, role reversal where masters served slaves for a day. Sound familiar? They didn't replace it, they just rebranded it, changed the name, kept the frequency, and every year you participate in an ancient ritual without knowing what you're actually invoking. Listen, I know this sounds heavy right out the gate, but stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through isn't conspiracy theory. It's observable pattern recognition, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. So, here's the thing nobody talks about. Every December you change. You become a different version of yourself. More emotional, more nostalgic. You spend money you didn't plan to spend. You feel things you didn't choose to feel. You slow down. Time feels weird. You connect with people you've ignored for 11 months. And then January hits. And you set all these intentions, new year, new you. And by March, they're gone. Completely dissolved. And you've been told this is just the holiday spirit, right? Cultural tradition. Family time. The magic of Christmas. But here's what messes with people when they really start paying attention. Your body doesn't respond to spirit. Your body responds to ritual. Your nervous system treats December like an emergency broadcast. Childhood memories flood back without permission. You feel generous, guilty, lonely, hopeful, all at the exact same time. And it happens every single year, like clockwork. Same patterns, same emotional peaks, same exhaustion in January. You never questioned why. Nobody told you that collective emotion collapses reality faster than individual intention. Nobody explained that when billions of people feel the same thing at the same time, it creates a massive electromagnetic field effect. Nobody mentioned that ancient civilizations specifically used seasonal rituals to lock timelines and reset populations. You thought you were celebrating. You were participating. And I mean, think about this for a second. Christmas lines up with the winter solstice, the exact moment when Earth's axis tilts farthest from the sun and human consciousness becomes most receptive to suggestion. That's not poetry. That's neuroscience meeting ancient technology. The darkest day of the year, maximum darkness, maximum biological vulnerability, and right there, right at that moment, humanity has put its biggest ritual. Every culture that understood consciousness put something massive at the solstice. Every single one. That's not coincidence. That's design. Rituals work through repetition, plus symbolism, plus emotion. Do something once? It's an event. Do it every year for your entire life. That's identity programming. Add symbols that bypass your logic, trees, lights, gifts, blood red colors, and you're speaking directly to the subconscious. You're writing code into the operating system. Here's what the elite understand that you weren't taught. Memory plus emotion plus symbolism equals subconscious overwrite. Every December, your childhood imprints reactivate. The songs, the smells, the movies, they don't remind you of Christmas. They are Christmas. They encode it into your nervous system year after year after year. And when billions of people synchronize around the same symbols at the same time, reality bends. Timelines reset. The collective field rewrites itself. This is why January feels like a new beginning, even though it's literally just another month on a human-made calendar. The ritual completed, the frequency shifted, your reality got rebooted, and you didn't even know you agreed to it. So after this video, you're never going to experience Christmas the same way again. I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I'm saying it because once you see the ritual clearly, not with paranoia, but with clarity, you can't go back to unconscious participation. You're going to stop powering traditions you didn't choose. You're going to notice when nostalgia hits and recognize it as a trigger instead of a truth. You're going to watch the symbols appear and understand what they're designed to do. You're going to feel the emotional pull and realize this isn't random magic. This is ancient technology, and it's still running, still working, still extracting. And look, this isn't about rejecting Christmas. This isn't about ruining December or making you feel bad for enjoying yourself. This is about seeing what's actually happening. Christmas is frequency engineering. It's consciousness architecture. It's a reality collapse mechanism disguised as cultural tradition. Once you see it, once you really understand how rituals work, how collective emotion shapes reality, how symbolic repetition programs the subconscious, you can never unsee it. And that's not a loss. That's freedom. Because rituals only control you when you don't know you're inside them. All right, so let me take you back. Way back. Before Christianity. Before Jesus. Before any of the stories you were told about December 25th. The winter solstice has been humanity's most significant moment for tens of thousands of years. And I mean, when you really think about it, of course it was. You're living in a time before electric lights, before central heating, before you could just flip a switch and make darkness disappear. The sun is your only reliable source of warmth and light. And every day after the summer solstice, the sun sets a little earlier. Days get shorter. Nights get longer. It's getting colder, darker. And there's this moment, this one specific day, where the sun reaches its lowest point in the sky. The shortest day, the longest night. December 21st, give or take. To ancient people, this was the moment when the sun might just keep dying, when darkness might actually win. And on a biological level, they were right to be terrified. Because without the sun returning, everyone dies. Crops don't grow, animals don't survive, civilization collapses. So what did they do? They created rituals. Massive, elaborate, emotionally intense rituals designed to, and I'm being literal here, convince the sun to come back, or honor its return, or celebrate its rebirth. The ritual changes depending on the culture, but the timing, always the same, always the solstice. The Egyptians celebrated the rebirth of Horus. The Persians celebrated Mithras, the sun god, born from a rock on December 25th. The Norse had Yule, burning logs, bringing evergreen trees into the home, to remind themselves that life persists even in death season. The Celts lit bonfires. The Romans had Saturnalia, which we already talked about. And here's where it gets interesting. Christianity shows up. Jesus becomes the central figure of a new religion. But the people spreading Christianity had a problem. You can't just erase rituals that have been embedded into human consciousness for thousands of years. You can't tell populations, hey, stop celebrating the solstice, it's pagan now. So instead, they did something way smarter. They layered their story on top of the existing ritual. They said, Jesus, light of the world, was born on December 25th, even though he wasn't. Even though every biblical scholar will tell you the shepherds in the field, the census, the historical timeline, it all points to spring or fall, not winter. But December 25th wasn't chosen for historical accuracy. It was chosen for psychological effectiveness. They took Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, the Roman holiday on December 25th, celebrating the sun's victory over darkness, and they said, that's Jesus now. He's the light. He's the rebirth. He's the sun that never dies. And it worked, because the ritual was already there. The emotional infrastructure was already built. The symbolism was already embedded. All they had to do was change the name. Christmas didn't start with Jesus. Christmas is the continuation of something way, way older. A technology for resetting collective consciousness at the most psychologically vulnerable moment of the year. And here's the thing that made my stomach drop when I first researched this. The early Christian church knew this. They wrote about it. St. Augustine, one of the most influential church fathers, literally said they chose December 25th to align with pagan festivals so conversion would be easier. They didn't hide it. They just waited until most people forgot. So now you've got this ritual that's been running for thousands of years. Same time, same symbols, same emotional beats. And every year, billions of people participate without ever asking why. They just do it. Because that's what you do in December. That's how deep the programming goes. Okay, so let's talk about Saturnalia specifically, because this is where it gets wild. Saturn was the Roman god of time, agriculture, wealth, and, this is key, limitation. He represented the golden age that once existed and then disappeared. A time when humans lived without labor, without struggle. And every December, the Romans celebrated this lost golden age by flipping reality upside down for a week. Masters served slaves. Social norms collapsed. People gave gifts. They decorated with greenery. They feasted and drank and partied for 7 straight days, from December 17th to December 23rd, sometimes extending to the 25th. And here's the part that's eerie. The way they described Saturn is almost identical to how we describe Santa, an old figure with a long beard. Associated with judgment and time, he sees everything. He knows if you've been good or bad. He rewards the deserving and punishes the wicked. Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, Father Christmas, Kris Kringle. All different names for the same archetype. And that archetype is way older than Christianity. It's the elder judge, the overseer, the one who watches and records and distributes justice based on your behavior. And I know, some of you are already thinking, okay, but Santa is just a fun story for kids. It's harmless. And yeah, on the surface, sure. But let me ask you something. Why does Santa live at the North Pole, the literal top of the world, the place where he can see everything? Why does he have a list? Why does he check it twice? Why is the entire mythology built around surveillance and judgment? Because that's the function of the archetype, to teach children that they are always being watched, that their behavior is always being recorded, that rewards and punishments come from an external authority figure who sees and knows everything. You're teaching kids to internalize the concept of constant observation, and they carry that into adulthood. You don't believe in Santa anymore, but the pattern is already installed. The belief that someone somewhere is keeping track, that you're being judged, that you need to be good to deserve rewards. That's not child's play, that's behavioral conditioning. And Saturnalia didn't disappear. It just got rebranded. Same gift giving, same feasting, same role reversal. Now we call it the season of giving, where the wealthy are expected to be generous to the less fortunate. Same decorations, same time frame, same emotional beats. They didn't replace the ritual, they just changed the mascot and told you it was something new. Now here's where this gets into something even deeper. Because it's not just about history. It's not just about symbols. It's about what happens to you biologically and psychologically every single December. And this is the part that most people feel but never name. Every year, like clockwork, you experience emotional states in December that you don't experience any other time. You feel nostalgia so intense it almost hurts. You feel generous in ways that don't make logical sense. You're giving to people you barely know, spending money you don't really have, exhausting yourself to make others happy. You feel lonely even when you're surrounded by people. You feel hopeful and resigned at the same time. And here's what's crazy. So does everyone else. At the exact same time. Billions of people, all feeling variations of the same emotional cocktail, synchronized across the entire planet. That's not culture. That's mass entrainment. You know how, when you're at a concert and everyone's moving to the same beat? How your heartbeat actually starts syncing with the people around you? How the crowd becomes one organism for a moment? That's entrainment. That's collective coherence. Now scale that to 2 billion people, all listening to the same songs, all looking at the same symbols, all performing the same rituals, all feeling the same emotions. What do you think that does to collective consciousness? In the late 90s, Princeton University ran something called the Global Consciousness Project. They set up random number generators all over the world, devices that should produce completely random results, with no pattern whatsoever. And they monitored them during major global events. September 11th, the death of Princess Diana, the funeral of Pope John Paul II, New Year's Eve. And something impossible happened. The randomness decreased. The numbers started showing coherence, statistical deviation that should not exist. As if millions of people focusing on the same event at the same time was affecting physical reality. They called it field consciousness. The idea that when enough minds sync up, something measurable happens in the physical world. Now think about Christmas. Not just one day, an entire season. Months of build-up, the same songs on repeat, the same movies playing every year, the same symbols everywhere you look, the same emotional narratives reinforced through every commercial, every conversation, every tradition. You're being entrained. Your emotional frequency is being synchronized with everyone else's. And when that many people hit the same frequency at the same time, reality becomes fluid. That's not metaphor. That's quantum mechanics. Observation collapses the wave function. Attention shapes reality. And collective attention? Collective attention at that scale. That's a reality collapse event. December doesn't just feel different because of the weather or the holidays. December feels different because you're participating in the largest synchronized emotional event in human history. And your nervous system knows it. Your body responds to it. Even if your conscious mind has no idea what's happening. You feel it every year. That weird vulnerability, that emotional openness, time slowing down. You're not imagining it. You're responding exactly as designed. So let me tell you about the moment this clicked for me personally. Because I used to think I was just sentimental about Christmas. I loved it. The lights, the music, the whole thing. I'd get emotional watching those Coca-Cola commercials with the polar bears. I'd tear up hearing, "I'll be home for Christmas." I thought I was just a softie. But then, one December, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, I was standing in a Target. Middle of the afternoon, December 18th or something. And I'm walking through the store, and the Christmas music is playing, and there are decorations everywhere, and I'm getting that feeling. You know the one. That warm, nostalgic, slightly melancholic feeling. And I had this thought. I should buy something for my mom. Something nice. Something she doesn't need but would make her happy. And I stopped, right there in the aisle. And I asked myself, do I actually want to do this? Or do I feel like I have to? And I couldn't answer. I literally couldn't tell the difference between genuine desire and programmed compulsion. That's when it hit me. This isn't mine. This feeling, this generosity, this nostalgia, this whole emotional state. It activates on schedule every year whether I want it to or not. That's not sentiment, that's programming. And here's what really messed with me. I study consciousness for a living. I teach people how to break conditioned patterns. I've spent years learning how to observe my own mental and emotional processes. And even I didn't see it until I stopped and asked the question. If this got past me, it's getting past everyone. Because the ritual is so normalized, so culturally embedded, so emotionally reinforced, that questioning it feels like attacking something sacred. Like being ungrateful, like missing the point. But what if questioning it is exactly the point? What if conscious participation starts with seeing the mechanism clearly? I started tracking my behavior, December to December, year over year. And the patterns were undeniable. Same emotional arcs, same spending spikes, same exhaustion in January, same resolution setting followed by the same fade out by March. And it wasn't just me. Everyone I knew was running the same program, different details, same structure. That's when I started asking, what is a ritual, really? And why does it work even when you don't believe in it? Because here's the thing about rituals that most people don't understand. You don't need faith for a ritual to work. You just need participation. Rituals function through repetition plus symbolism plus emotional engagement. You can be a complete atheist and still get tears in your eyes watching It's a Wonderful Life for the 20th time. You can reject all religious meaning and still feel different in December. The ritual doesn't care what you believe. It cares what you do. And what you do programs your subconscious. Think about it like this. If I asked you to brush your teeth every morning for 30 years, that becomes automatic, right? You don't think about it. You just do it. Your body knows the routine. Your mind disengages. It's a habit. Now add meaning to that habit, add symbolism, add emotion, add collective participation. Now it's not just a habit, it's a ritual. And rituals go deeper than habits because they're encoding identity, not just behavior. Every time you participate in Christmas, you're reinforcing the neural pathways associated with Christmas. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the emotions, they all fire together. And neurons that fire together wire together. That's basic neuroscience. Do this once? Negligible impact. Do this every year for your entire childhood and then your entire adult life. That's identity-level programming. And here's the kicker. Rituals that happen annually are more powerful than rituals that happen daily. Why? Because annual rituals mark time itself. They become identity checkpoints. Every December you ask yourself, consciously or unconsciously, who am I compared to last year? What's changed? What's stayed the same? The ritual forces self-evaluation. It creates a before and after. It makes you measure yourself against your past. Christmas isn't a day. Christmas is a reality checkpoint, and checkpoints determine what gets locked in for the next cycle. So now let's talk about what happens when you scale this up. When you go from individual ritual to collective ritual. Because this is where it gets into something that sounds impossible until you look at the actual research. Collective emotion doesn't just feel powerful. It measurably affects physical reality. We already talked about the Global Consciousness Project, but let me go deeper. In 2008, researchers at the HeartMath Institute did studies on group coherence. They had people meditate together, focusing on the same intention, syncing their breathing, and their emotional states. And they measured the electromagnetic fields being generated. Individual hearts produce electromagnetic fields that extend several feet beyond the body. That's measurable. That's not woo-woo. But when groups synced up, when they achieved coherence, the field strength didn't just add up, it multiplied. The collective field was exponentially stronger than the sum of individual fields. Now think about a stadium full of people. 70,000 people watching the same game, feeling the same tension, erupting in the same celebration at the same moment. You can feel the field. You know when a crowd is into it versus when they're not. That's not imagination. That's a measurable, energetic phenomenon. Now scale that to Christmas. Not 70,000 people, 2 billion people, all over the planet, synchronized through the same songs, the same symbols, the same emotional narratives. That's not just a field. That's a reality engine. Quantum physics tells us that observation collapses probability into reality, the observer effect. Your attention literally shapes what becomes manifest. That's not philosophy. That's been demonstrated in lab after lab after lab. The double slit experiment, quantum entanglement, wave function collapse. So what happens when 2 billion observers sync up? When they're all looking at the same symbols, feeling the same emotions, expecting the same outcomes? Reality doesn't just shift, reality locks. And this is why December feels so different. It's not just cultural conditioning. You're swimming in a collective field that's so strong, so coherent, so synchronized, that it overrides individual consciousness. You become part of the wave. Your personal frequency gets absorbed into the collective frequency. And here's what nobody tells you. That collective frequency isn't neutral. It's not just holiday cheer. It's a specific mixture of emotions deliberately designed to make you more suggestible, more compliant, more willing to participate in systems that don't serve you. Nostalgia makes you long for a past that never existed. Guilt makes you spend money to prove you care. Loneliness makes you seek connection through consumption. Generosity makes you give even when you're depleted. Hope makes you set intentions you'll abandon by February. Every emotion serves a function. And when those emotions hit simultaneously across billions of people, you get a population that's predictable, manageable, and economically exploitable. That's not an accident. That's architecture. Now let's talk about why memory's the real weapon here. Because this is the part that disturbs me the most. Rituals don't just affect your present emotional state, they rewrite your past. Every December, your childhood Christmas memories get reactivated. The smell of pine, the sound of silent night, the taste of gingerbread. And when those sensory triggers hit, you're not in the present moment anymore. You're transported backward. You're 5 years old again, you're 10 years old. You're experiencing Christmas through the eyes of a child who didn't have critical thinking yet. Memory isn't storage. Memory is reconstruction. Every time you remember something, you're not pulling up a recording. You're rebuilding that memory in real time. And every time you rebuild it, it changes slightly, gets rewritten, gets infused with your current emotional state. So every December, when you smell pine and hear carols and see lights, you're not just remembering Christmas. You're re-experiencing the emotions you felt as a child and blending them with what you're feeling now. Past and present collapse into each other. And here's why this matters. Children don't have the same critical filters adults do. When you were 5 years old and you believed in Santa and everything felt magical, you absorbed Christmas uncritically. It went straight into your subconscious without passing through your logical mind. That imprint is still there. And every December, that imprint gets refreshed, gets reinforced, gets reactivated. You're not just feeling nostalgic. You're being temporarily regressed to an earlier version of yourself. A version that was more open, more suggestible, more willing to believe. And when you're in that state, when you're operating from that childhood imprint, you're vulnerable. You'll spend money you don't have. You'll participate in traditions you don't even like. You'll feel obligations that don't make sense. Because you're not making adult decisions. You're running childhood programming. Memory is the gateway. Control the memory. Control the person. And Christmas controls memory better than any other cultural ritual because it starts so early. Before you have language, before you have critical thinking, before you have any defense against symbolic programming. Your first Christmases are pre-verbal. You can't remember them consciously, but your nervous system remembers. The lights, the sounds, the emotions in the room, all of it gets encoded before you have the ability to question it. By the time you're old enough to think critically, the pattern is already installed, and the culture around you reinforces it every single year. This is why grown adults tear up during Christmas commercials. This is why hearing, "I'll be home for Christmas," hits you in the chest. This is why you feel compelled to recreate traditions you don't even enjoy. You're not responding to the present. You're responding to every Christmas you've ever experienced simultaneously. The memories layer on top of each other. They compound. And the emotional weight becomes overwhelming. That's not sentiment. That's manipulation at the deepest possible level. All right, let's talk about Santa again, because the Santa archetype is one of the most brilliant pieces of social programming ever created. Think about what children are taught about Santa. He's an all-seeing, all-knowing authority figure who monitors your behavior year-round. He keeps a list, he checks it twice. He knows when you've been bad or good. And based on that surveillance, he rewards obedience and punishes disobedience. Now think about what that teaches. You are always being watched. Your behavior is always being recorded. An external authority determines your worth. Obedience equals reward. Disobedience equals punishment. That's not a cute story. That's training children to accept surveillance states and hierarchical authority systems. And here's the genius part. Kids eventually learn Santa isn't real. They grow up. They stop believing. But the pattern doesn't stop. It just transfers. The same kids who believed Santa was watching them grow up to accept that God is watching them, or that the government is watching them, or that their employer is tracking them, or that social media algorithms are monitoring them. The specifics change. The structure stays the same. Constant observation, behavioral judgment, reward and punishment based on compliance. Santa was practice. The real system comes later. And I know some people are going to say, but Santa teaches generosity. Kids learn to think about others. They learn the joy of giving. Do they? Or do they learn that love is transactional? That you have to earn presents through good behavior? That your value is determined by how well you follow the rules? Because most kids don't experience Santa as pure generosity. They experience Santa as conditional approval. If you're good, you'll get presents. If you're bad, you'll get coal. That's not teaching generosity. That's teaching children that they need to perform to be loved. And then you grow up and wonder why you tie your self-worth to productivity, why you feel like you need to earn love, why you're terrified of being bad or making mistakes. Santa was just the beginning. The pattern's been running your whole life. And here's another layer to the Santa thing that gets dark. The red suit, the workshop at the North Pole, the elves, the reindeer. None of that is arbitrary. Red has always been associated with power and blood and sacrifice. The North Pole, the Axis Mundi, the top of the world, the point where heaven touches earth. Elves, originally from Norse mythology, supernatural beings who exist between worlds. Reindeer, animals associated with shamanic journeys and altered states. Santa Claus is a mashup of pagan symbolism dressed up as a children's story. And every year, kids are taught to write letters to Santa, to make requests, to state their desires to an unseen authority figure who may or may not grant them. That's ritual magic. That's petitioning an entity for favor. That's training children to participate in ceremonial practices without understanding what they're doing. And before you think I'm reaching, go look up the origins of Saint Nicholas. The actual historical figure was a Christian bishop in Turkey who supposedly performed miracles. The mythology around him got blended with Norse gods like Odin, who also had a long beard, rode through the sky and gave gifts during Yule. Santa is an amalgamation of ancient archetypes, and those archetypes have always represented the same thing: authority, judgment, reward, and punishment. So now, let's talk about December 25th specifically. Because this date is not neutral, this date has been significant for thousands of years across multiple cultures, and it's not because of Jesus. December 25th is 3 days after the winter solstice. The solstice is December 21st or 22nd, depending on the year. That's the shortest day, the longest night, the moment of maximum darkness. And for 3 days, December 22nd, 23rd, 24th, the sun appears to stand still in the sky. It doesn't move north or south. It just sits there. Ancient people didn't have the astronomical knowledge we have today. They didn't know the Earth's axial tilt causes this. They thought the sun was dying, stopping, possibly never coming back. And then, on December 25th, the sun starts moving again. It begins its journey back north. Days start getting longer. The light returns. Symbolically, the sun is reborn on December 25th. Which is why so many sun gods throughout history have their birthday on December 25th. Horus in Egypt, Mithras in Persia, Sol Invictus in Rome, and eventually, Jesus. Jesus wasn't inserted into this date randomly. This date already meant the return of the light. Christianity just gave it a new name. And here's where it gets interesting. The 3 days the sun stands still, that's where you get the death and resurrection motif. The sun dies for 3 days and then is reborn. Sound familiar? Jesus dies, stays in the tomb for 3 days, then resurrects. That's the same pattern, same time frame, same symbolism. I'm not saying Jesus didn't exist. I'm not arguing theology. I'm pointing out that the narrative structure of death and rebirth at the winter solstice predates Christianity by thousands of years. It's a solar myth. And Christianity adopted it because it was already embedded in human consciousness. The ritual was already there. They just changed the central character. And this is why December 25th feels significant, even if you're not religious. Because the date carries thousands of years of accumulated meaning. It's been marked as sacred for so long that it exists in collective consciousness as a threshold, a turning point, a moment of transformation. You don't need to believe in Jesus for December 25th to affect you. The programming runs deeper than religion. It's astronomical, biological, and psychological all at once. So here's the question you should be asking at this point. If Christmas is this ancient, this powerful, this embedded into human consciousness, who benefits from keeping it that way? Because rituals don't persist for thousands of years by accident. They persist because they serve a function, and somebody somewhere benefits from that function. Let's start with the obvious. Economics. Retail businesses make 30 to 40% of their annual revenue in November and December. 40%. Almost half of their entire year happens in 2 months. If Christmas disappeared, the economy would collapse. And I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean global economic systems depend on Christmas spending. Entire industries are structured around it. Shipping, manufacturing, retail, advertising, media, all of it peaks in December. So you've got corporations, governments, and financial institutions with a vested interest in making sure Christmas stays emotionally compelling, making sure people feel obligated to spend, making sure guilt and generosity and nostalgia all hit at the same time, so you buy more than you can afford. They don't care if you go into debt. They don't care if you're stressed and exhausted. They care that you participate, that you spend, that you keep the machine running. Now let's go deeper. Christmas reinforces social hierarchy. Family structures reactivate. You go back to your parents' house, and suddenly you're not an adult anymore. You're the child again. You defer to authority. You fall back into old roles. You participate in dynamics you've spent the rest of the year trying to escape. And this happens across millions of families simultaneously. Social hierarchy gets reinforced. Generational authority gets reaffirmed. The structure holds. Christmas also reinforces cultural obedience. Shared rituals create shared reality. When everyone's participating in the same tradition, when everyone's listening to the same songs, when everyone's following the same script, it creates cohesion, and cohesive populations are easier to manage. You don't question the ritual, because everyone's doing it. You don't opt out because opting out means social exclusion. You go along with it even when it doesn't serve you, because resistance feels worse than participation. And here's the part that's really disturbing. Christmas creates predictable emotions. Every December, they know exactly how you're going to feel. They know nostalgia will peak. They know generosity will spike. They know guilt will intensify. They know loneliness will hit people who are isolated. And once emotions are predictable, behavior is predictable. And predictable populations are controllable populations. Every December, you become emotionally vulnerable in ways you're not the rest of the year. Your defenses drop. Your critical thinking softens. You're more open to suggestion, more willing to spend, more compliant with social expectations. That's not an accident. That's the function of the ritual. They need you predictable. They need you vulnerable. They need you participating. Because if millions of people suddenly stopped engaging with Christmas, if they stopped spending, stopped conforming, stopped synchronizing their emotions, the entire system would destabilize. Christmas isn't maintained because it's beautiful. Christmas is maintained because it works. And now let's talk about what happens after. Because the ritual doesn't end on December 25th. The real impact shows up in January. Every year, January feels like a reset, a fresh start. New year, new you, clean slate. And culturally, we're taught to set resolutions, goals, intentions. We're told this is the perfect time to transform your life. But think about what just happened to you. You spent October, November, and December in an escalating emotional state. Nostalgia, guilt, generosity, stress, obligation, exhaustion. You drained your emotional and financial reserves. You performed rituals. You participated in a massive collective event that synchronized your consciousness with billions of other people. And then suddenly it stops. December ends. The decorations come down. The music stops playing. The lights go off. And you're supposed to immediately transition into this high-energy, goal-oriented transformation mindset. But you don't have energy. You're running on empty. The ritual just extracted everything you had. So you set resolutions. You make promises to yourself. You're going to eat healthier, exercise more, be more productive, finally finish that project. And by February, 92% of people have already abandoned those resolutions. That's not a willpower problem. That's a ritual completion problem. December doesn't just end. Your emotional field collapses. Your identity gets reset to factory settings. You're disoriented. You're exhausted. And in that disoriented, exhausted state, you're highly suggestible. Which is why January is when they sell you the next program. The diet plans, the gym memberships, the self-improvement courses, the productivity apps. You're told you're not enough. But if you buy this thing, follow this plan, adopt this system, you can become who you're supposed to be. And you believe it, because you just came out of a massive ritual that rewrote your subconscious. You're operating on autopilot. Your critical thinking hasn't fully come back online yet. So you buy in, you commit. And then by March, you're done. The energy's gone. The motivation disappeared. You're back to your baseline, wondering what happened. What happened is you tried to run a marathon immediately. After running a different marathon, you didn't even know you were running. January isn't a fresh start. January is post-ritual collapse. And the reason New Year's resolutions fail isn't because you're weak. It's because you're trying to start something new when you haven't recovered from what just ended. The system is designed this way. They need December to drain you, so January can sell to you. It's a cycle, and most people never see it, because they're inside it. All right? So now that you see the mechanism, now that you understand how this works, what do you do about it? Because here's the thing. You can't escape Christmas. It's everywhere. It's in the music, the decorations, the commercials, the conversations. You can't just opt out entirely without socially isolating yourself. And I'm not suggesting you become a hermit in December. What I'm suggesting is conscious participation, awareness instead of autopilot, choice instead of compulsion. So here's what you do. Starting right now, before December even begins, you implement the December Awareness Protocol. Here's how it works. When nostalgia hits, when you feel that warm emotional pull, don't immediately act on it. Pause. Take 3 breaths and say out loud or in your head, nostalgia trigger. That's it. You're not suppressing it. You're not fighting it. You're just naming it, labeling it, creating space between the feeling and your response. When guilt arises, when you feel like you should buy something, do something, be somewhere, same thing. Pause. 3 breaths. Guilt programming. When generosity feels compulsive, when you're about to spend money you don't have on something you don't really want to give, pause. 3 breaths. Is this mine, or is this ritual? Naming breaks the spell. Rituals work through unconscious participation. The moment you label what's happening, you step outside the automatic response. You create awareness. And awareness is power. You're not rejecting the emotions. You're not pretending they don't exist. You're just seeing them clearly. And once you see them, they lose their grip. Because here's what I noticed when I started doing this. Most of the emotions I thought were mine weren't actually mine. They were triggered by external symbols. Christmas music in a store, lights on a neighbor's house, a commercial showing a family reunion. The emotion would hit, and I'd think it was coming from inside me. But it wasn't. It was a response to a stimulus designed to trigger that exact emotion. Once I started naming it, nostalgia trigger, guilt programming, compulsion. The emotions stopped feeling overwhelming. They were just sensations, and sensations pass. So that's practice 1, awareness, observation without absorption. Practice 2 is symbol fasting. And this one's going to sound extreme, but hear me out. Limit your exposure to Christmas symbols. Not completely. Not to the point where you're miserable, but intentionally, strategically. Here's what I mean. Christmas music is designed to trigger emotional responses. The same songs, the same melodies, the same lyrics year after year. They're encoding the ritual into your nervous system through repetition. So instead of passively absorbing every Christmas song that plays everywhere you go, choose 1 or 2 songs you actually enjoy. Songs that feel meaningful to you. And listen to those. Let yourself have them. But mute the rest. Skip the radio stations playing non-stop Christmas music. Turn off the TV when commercials get heavy in December. Walk through stores quickly instead of lingering in the decorated sections. You're not avoiding Christmas. You're reducing the repetitive symbolic reinforcement. Same with decorations. If you genuinely love putting up a tree, put up a tree. If it brings you joy, do it. But don't do it because you feel like you have to. Don't decorate just to meet expectations or because everyone else is doing it. Choose 1 to 3 symbols that actually mean something to you. Let those be your Christmas. Don't drown yourself in 1,000 symbols that are just reinforcing patterns you didn't choose. Because here's what happens when you reduce exposure. You get space, mental space, emotional space. You stop being constantly triggered. You stop running on autopilot. And what you'll notice is you feel calmer, more grounded, less compelled. You're not missing out. You're just not being programmed as intensely. Practice 3 is the conscious giving reset. And this one might make some people uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Before you buy anything in December, before you give anything, before you commit to anything, pause. Ask yourself this question. Do I want to do this? Or do I feel like I have to? If the answer is, I feel like I have to, don't do it. I know that sounds harsh. I know it might create conflict, but here's the reality. Guilt-driven giving depletes you. It drains your energy. It reinforces the pattern of obligation over authenticity. Giving from obligation isn't generosity. It's tribute. It's you participating in a system that extracts your resources in exchange for social acceptance. Real generosity feels light. It feels easy. You want to give. There's no guilt, no pressure, no internal conflict. You're giving because it aligns with who you are, not because you're trying to prove you're a good person. So this December, give intentionally. One meaningful gift instead of 10 obligatory ones. And if people push back, if they make you feel guilty for not participating the way they expect, here's your script. This year, I'm being more intentional with my energy and resources. I'm focusing on meaningful connection over material exchange. That's it. You don't owe anyone more explanation than that. You're not being selfish. You're being honest. And most people will respect that more than you think. What you'll notice when you start doing this is how much lighter you feel, how much more present you are, how much energy you have left after December instead of being completely drained. Practice 4 is the solstice identity check-in, and this is where you reclaim the ritual for yourself. On December 21st, the actual winter solstice, sit in darkness for 10 minutes. No phone, no distractions, just you and the dark. And in that darkness, ask yourself, who do I want to become in the next cycle? Not, what do I want to achieve? Not, what are my goals? Who do I want to become? What version of myself do I want to embody? And write down 3 identity statements. Not goals, not resolutions, identity. For example, I am someone who protects my energy. I am someone who gives from overflow, not obligation. I am someone who participates consciously instead of automatically. Identity statements are more powerful than goals because they change how you operate at the core. Goals are about doing. Identity is about being. When you write these on the solstice, you're using that threshold energy consciously. You're creating your own reset instead of letting the collective ritual reset you. And here's why this works. The solstice is still a powerful moment. It's still a turning point. The light still returns. But instead of unconsciously absorbing the collective programming, you're making your own meaning. You're deciding who you are instead of letting the ritual decide for you. You're not resisting Christmas. You're redirecting it. You're using the same threshold energy for your own transformation instead of letting it be used on you. Practice 5 is the January timeline lock. And this is how you protect yourself from the post-ritual programming. January 1st through 3rd, revisit your solstice identity statements. Read them. Feel them. Reconnect with who you decided to become. And then create one simple daily practice that reinforces that identity. Not a massive overhaul, not a total transformation. One small thing. If your identity statement is, I am someone who protects my energy, your practice might be, I check in with myself twice a day and ask if my energy is mine or if I'm leaking it. If your identity statement is, I am someone who gives from overflow, your practice might be, I only say yes to requests when I genuinely have the energy to follow through. One practice, one reinforcement, daily. And here's the critical part. Avoid all New Year, New You content. All of it. Don't watch the videos. Don't read the articles. Don't buy the programs. All of that content is designed to make you feel inadequate, so you'll buy solutions to problems you didn't have before they told you that you did. You already decided who you're becoming. On the solstice, you locked your timeline before the collective programming intensified. Now you just reinforce it through your daily practice. What you'll notice in January is how stable you feel compared to previous years. How immune you are to the should messaging. How little you care about typical New Year's chaos. You're operating from your own frequency instead of absorbing the collective frequency. And that's freedom. So let me bring this all together, because here's what you now understand that most people never see. You didn't lose your power in December. You gave it away unconsciously. You participated in a ritual you never chose. You were activated by symbols you never decoded. You ran emotional patterns you never questioned. And now you see it. You see the solstice timing. You see the pagan origins. You see how Saturnalia became Christmas. You see the symbol system, the trees, the lights, the red and green, the gifts, the surveillance archetype of Santa. You see how memory is the real gateway, how childhood imprints get reactivated every year. You see how collective emotion creates field effects that shape reality. You see the economic extraction. You see the social control. You see the January reset that's designed to sell you the next program. You can't unsee this now. Every December from now on, you're going to notice the patterns. You're going to feel the triggers. You're going to watch other people unconsciously participate in real time. And you're going to choose. Not resistance, not rejection, choice. You can still enjoy December. You can still appreciate the lights and the music and the connection. But now you're doing it consciously. You're participating because you choose to, not because you're compelled to. You're giving from genuine desire, not guilt. You're connecting from authenticity, not obligation. Christmas doesn't control reality. Unconscious participation does. Rituals only work when you don't know you're inside them. Now, you know. And here's what that means going forward. You get to decide what December means to you. You get to choose which traditions serve you and which ones don't. You get to participate without surrendering your energy. You get to use the seasonal threshold consciously instead of being used by it. The elite don't avoid Christmas. They participate with full awareness. They understand the mechanism. They use the collective energy surge without being drained by it. Now you can too. So, if this hit different, if something in this clicked for you, hit the like button. Because the algorithm suppresses content like this. Your engagement actually matters. It determines whether more people see this or whether it gets buried. And comment below. Tell me, what part of Christmas always felt off to you? What did you notice before you could name it? I genuinely want to know, because everyone's got that one thing that never sat right, that one tradition that felt weird, that one moment where you thought, why are we doing this? Share it in the comments. Let's see how many people have been feeling the same thing without realizing other people felt it too. And subscribe, because Christmas is only one ritual. We're going to break down all of them. The other holidays, the cultural traditions, the social programming that runs in the background of your entire life. Once you see the pattern, you can't stop seeing it. And once enough people see it, the whole thing changes. They've been using seasons to shape reality for thousands of years. The solstices, the equinoxes, the harvest cycles, the death and rebirth narratives. Ancient priesthoods knew, modern power structures know. Now it's your turn to use them consciously. December is coming. This time, you decide what it means.